I'm Charlotte, 58 years old, a single mother who gave everything to raise my daughter Stephanie. We used to be incredibly close, but things changed after she met and got engaged to David. Then one day, I discovered I wasn't invited to my own daughter's wedding. With that wound still fresh, Stephanie showed up demanding to use my beach house, worth $2.6 million. Where are you watching from today? Hit that like and subscribe button to support me as I share how I handled this heartbreaking situation with my daughter. Life wasn't always easy as a single mum. My marriage ended when Stephanie was just 7 years old, leaving me to raise her on my own. Those early days were a blur of exhaustion and determination. I remember sitting at our tiny kitchen table, calculating bills and wondering how I would make ends meet. I worked as a real estate agent, which meant unpredictable hours and income. Some months were good, others were terrifying, but I never let Stephanie see my fear. To her, I was always smiling, always reassuring, always strong. For 20 years, I sacrificed everything for her. Weekends weren't for relaxation. They were for showing houses to clients who couldn't meet during weekdays. While other mothers were dating or rebuilding their lives, I turned down every potential relationship. My daughter needed stability, not a parade of men walking through our lives. Vacations. Those were rare luxuries. Every spare dollar went towards Stephanie's education fund, our modest home, or emergency savings. Despite the challenges, we built a beautiful relationship. Some of my fondest memories are of us cooking together in our small kitchen. Stephanie would stand on a stool, her little hands covered in flour, as we made cookies from my grandmother's recipe. On summer evenings, we would walk along the public beach near our apartment, collecting seashells and talking about her dreams. Every night without fail. No matter how tired I was, we read together before bedtime. It was our sacred ritual, 20 minutes of adventures in faraway lands. The beach house came much later. After years of hard work, saving every penny and slowly climbing the real estate ladder, I finally had enough for a down payment. It was a modest home by beachfront standards, but to us, it was paradise. The first time I turned the key in that lock with Stephanie standing beside me in her college sweatshirt, I felt like I had finally given her something worthy of all her patience during those lean years. "This is our family legacy," I told her as we stood on the deck, watching the sunset that first evening. "Someday you'll bring your own children here." Stephanie was always a thoughtful child. Even during her teenage years when many parents struggled with rebellion, she remained considerate and grateful. I remember her 16th birthday when she received far fewer gifts than her friends. Instead of complaining, she hugged me and whispered, "Thanks for everything you do, Mum. I know it's not easy." When college acceptance letters arrived, I was able to tell her something I'd dreamed of saying for years. "Don't worry about the cost. I've saved enough." The look of relief on her face was worth every extra hour I'd worked, every vacation I'd skipped, every date I'd declined. She graduated without a penny of student debt, something I was immensely proud of providing. I had such dreams for our future. The beach house would be our gathering place for holidays, summer vacations, and weekend getaways. I imagined grandchildren building sandcastles on the same beach where Stephanie had collected shells. I pictured Thanksgiving dinners with the ocean as our backdrop, Christmas mornings with stockings hung from the driftwood mantel. "When you have your own family," I would tell her, "this place will be where your children learn about their heritage and make memories that last a lifetime." Little did I know how quickly those dreams would unravel. Everything changed when Stephanie met David at a company event 4 years after her college graduation. She had just been promoted at her marketing firm, and the celebration brought together employees from several partner companies. David worked in finance, investment banking to be specific. When she first mentioned him, I was simply happy that she'd met someone who made her smile. "He's so worldly, Mum," she gushed during our weekly phone call. He's traveled everywhere and knows about wine and art and everything. I should have noticed the subtle shift even then, the slight implication that her upbringing had been lacking. But I was just glad to hear excitement in her voice. The first visible changes were in her appearance. Stephanie had always dressed casually: jeans, sweaters, practical shoes. Within months of dating David, her wardrobe transformed completely. Designer labels replaced thrift store finds. Her natural hair color gave way to expensive highlights. Even her speech patterns changed, adopting certain phrases and pronunciations that sounded distinctly unlike my daughter. Our phone calls grew shorter and less frequent. Our tradition of Sunday brunches every other week dwindled to once a month, then to when we can fit it in. When we did speak, Stephanie seemed distracted, often ending calls abruptly when David entered the room. The criticism started small. "Mom, don't you think it's time to update your furniture?" Or, "That outfit is really not doing you any favors." Comments I initially brushed off as her newly discovered interest in design or fashion. But they accumulated, each one chipping away at our foundation. 6 months into their relationship, Stephanie brought David to dinner at my home. I spent days preparing, wanting to make a good impression. I cooked my best dishes, bought new dinnerware, even splurged on expensive wine I couldn't really afford. From the moment he walked in, David's disdain was palpable. His eyes scanned my living room with barely concealed judgment. "Quaint?" he said in a tone that made it clear this wasn't a compliment. Throughout dinner, he asked pointed questions about my career. "Real estate in this market must be challenging for someone at your level," he remarked, swirling his wine. "My mother's friend sells properties in the 8-figure range exclusively." Stephanie, rather than defending me, seemed embarrassed by my home, my cooking, my stories. She quickly changed the subject whenever I spoke about our past or her childhood. "Mum," she'd interrupt, "David doesn't need to hear about that." By dessert, I felt like a stranger in my own home. As their relationship progressed, Stephanie became increasingly absorbed into David's world. His family, wealthy, connected, and intimidating, seemed to welcome her conditionally. "David's mother is taking me shopping this weekend to help refine my style," she told me once, not hearing the implication that her current style, the one I had helped shape, was somehow deficient. I tried to maintain our connection. I sent texts, suggested lunch dates, invited her to the beach house for weekends. Her responses grew increasingly delayed and dismissive. Super busy with work, or spending time with David's family at their lake house. On her birthday, I drove to her apartment with a homemade cake, the same chocolate recipe I'd made every year since she was a child. She opened the door looking flustered. "Mum, you should have called first. We're heading out to meet David's parents for dinner at Le Cirque." The cake remained in my car. I drove home alone. The most painful shift was hearing Stephanie begin to criticize my career. The very job that had put food on our table, paid for her education, and eventually secured our beach house became a source of embarrassment for her. "Real estate isn't really a career, Mum," she said during one particularly difficult lunch. "It's just sales. David says anyone can get a license and sell houses." I stared at her, this stranger wearing my daughter's face, and wondered where I had gone wrong. I discovered my daughter was getting married from a Facebook post. Not her post. She had long since limited what I could see on her social media. It was a photo shared by Amanda, one of Stephanie's college friends, who didn't know about our strained relationship. So excited to be a bridesmaid for Stephanie and David next month. Wedding countdown. I stared at my computer screen, the world tilting sideways. My daughter was getting married, and I hadn't been told, much less invited. I felt physically ill, rushing to the bathroom where I vomited from sheer emotional shock. With shaking hands, I called her. After 4 rings, she answered with an irritated, "Hello?" Background noise suggested she was out somewhere. Stephanie, I said, trying to keep my voice steady, I just saw Amanda's post about your wedding. The silence that followed told me everything. She wasn't going to deny it or claim it was a misunderstanding. I was going to tell you, she finally said, her voice cool and distant. We're keeping it very exclusive. Only people who are really important to our new life together. Those words, really important, struck like physical blows. 28 years of motherhood, of loving her, supporting her, sacrificing for her, and I wasn't really important to her new life. I don't understand, I whispered, tears streaming down my face. I'm your mother. Mum. She sighed, as if explaining something to a child. The wedding is at the Sinclair estate. It's very upscale. David's family has a certain image to maintain. You wouldn't fit in. Wouldn't fit in, I repeated, disbelieving. David's parents are concerned about appearances. His father is running for state senate next year. Everyone at the wedding will be influential people, Mum. Important people. And I'm not important enough. Another pause. David's family would be uncomfortable having someone like you there. His mother specifically mentioned that having a real estate agent as a mother-in-law was already challenging enough for their social circle. I thought about the irony. These people who looked down on me for selling houses while they happily lived in mansions someone like me had probably sold them. Stephanie, I raised you alone. I worked so hard to give you everything I could. How can you exclude me from your wedding? This is exactly why. She snapped. The guilt trips the constant reminders of your sacrifices. David says it's emotional manipulation. I don't need that negativity on my special day. I couldn't speak. Every word felt like a betrayal of our entire history together. I have to go, she said. We're at a tasting for the reception. I'll call you later. She never did. That night I lay awake until dawn, replaying our life together. The memory of Stephanie at 6, drawing a picture of just the two of us with the caption, "My family," in crooked letters. Stephanie at 12, making me breakfast in bed on Mother's Day. Stephanie at 18, hugging me after her high school graduation and whispering, "We did it, Mum." What had happened to that girl? Where had I gone wrong? The next day, I tried again. I called, texted, even emailed. My messages grew increasingly desperate. Please, Stephanie, I just want to understand. I've always supported your choices. I just want to be part of your special day. Whatever I did wrong, please let me make it right. Her responses, when they came at all, were brief and dismissive. You're making this about yourself, as usual. David thinks it's best if we maintain boundaries. If you really loved me, you'd respect our decision. The wedding date came and went. I spent the day alone at the beach house, staring at the ocean and feeling a grief so profound it seemed to physically weigh me down. I didn't check social media. I couldn't bear to see the glimpses of a celebration I had been denied. I felt not just hurt, but humiliated. How would I explain to friends, to colleagues, to the few family members I still had contact with, that I wasn't wanted at my only child's wedding? The betrayal cut deeper than anything I'd ever experienced. This wasn't a teenage rebellion or a momentary lapse in judgment. This was a deliberate, calculated exclusion, a statement that the life I had built, the person I was, the mother I had been, was something to be ashamed of. 3 days after the wedding, my doorbell rang unexpectedly on a Tuesday afternoon. I was working from home, still moving through my days in a fog of grief. When I opened the door, Stephanie stood there in designer sunglasses, a new diamond tennis bracelet glinting on her wrist alongside her wedding band. Stephanie, I said, genuinely surprised. Come in. She stepped inside, removing her sunglasses and glancing around the living room with that now familiar look of mild disdain. No hug, No warm greeting, certainly no apology. The wedding was beautiful, she said casually, as if we were continuing a conversation about an event I had attended. David's parents rented the entire estate, 500 guests. I said nothing, waiting for some acknowledgement of the pain she had caused. It didn't come. Actually, she continued, setting her designer purse on my coffee table. I'm here about the beach house. The beach house, I repeated, confused. Yes, we need it for the next 3 months. I stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. Need it for what? Our honeymoon initially. David wants a private space for us. Then his parents might use it for a few weeks. We're thinking of hosting some weekend gatherings for his colleagues after that. The audacity left me speechless. She hadn't invited me to her wedding, had barely spoken to me in months, and now was asking, no telling me, that she needed my most valuable possession. Stephanie, that's my home. I have plans to use it myself this summer. Her expression hardened. Mum, we need the beach house. David specifically wants that location. I'm sorry, but no. You can rent a place nearby if you want to be in that area. That's when she said it. The words that still echo in my head during sleepless nights. You owe me this, Mum. I owe you, I repeated, sure I'd misheard. Yes, I had to grow up with less than everyone else. Do you know how embarrassing it was explaining to my friends why we couldn't go on ski trips or to Europe like they did? Why I had to wear Target clothes instead of what everyone else had? I deserved better. I felt like I'd been slapped. Every extra shift I'd worked, every penny I'd saved, every sacrifice I'd made, all of it dismissed as inadequate. I gave you everything I could, I said quietly. I worked so hard to give you a good life. A good life. She laughed bitterly. Mum, we were practically poor. David's parents gave him a BMW for his 16th birthday. I got a used Honda when I was already in college. We were never poor, Stephanie. We were comfortable. I put you through college without debt. Do you know how rare that is? The bare minimum, she muttered. You did the bare minimum while making sure I felt guilty about it my entire life. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. The beach house is not available. It's my home purchased with my money, and I decide who uses it. Her eyes narrowed. If you really loved me, you'd do this one thing for me. David says you're being selfish, that a mother who truly cared would want to help start our marriage off right. There it was again. David says. My daughter had become a ventriloquist's dummy for a man who had known her for a fraction of the time I had. David has no right to call me selfish, I said, my voice finally breaking. And neither do you. Stephanie stood up abruptly. I need an answer by tomorrow. We're planning to arrive on Friday. Her tone suggested this was a foregone conclusion. I need time to think, I said, though in my heart I already knew my answer. She walked to the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. Just remember, Mum, this is a chance to finally do something meaningful for me. As the door closed behind her, those words hung in the air like poison. 28 years of motherhood reduced to finally doing something meaningful. I sank onto the couch, shaking. This wasn't my daughter. Not anymore. After Stephanie left, I sat in stunned silence for nearly an hour. The audacity of her demand, the cruelty of her words, it was overwhelming. Eventually, I did what I always do in times of crisis. I called Janet, my best friend of 30 years. She said, "What?" Janet exclaimed after I recounted the conversation. "Charlotte, that's beyond entitled. That's delusional." I don't recognize her anymore, I admitted, voice breaking. It's like David and his family have completely rewired her brain. Listen to me, Janet said firmly. You have spent your entire adult life sacrificing for Stephanie. You have nothing to feel guilty about. That house is yours, your retirement security, your reward for decades of hard work. Don't let anyone, including your daughter, take that from you. Deep down, I knew she was right. For 28 years, my primary identity had been Stephanie's mum. Every decision filtered through the lens of what was best for her. But now, at 58, I needed to protect myself. I'm not going to argue with her, I told Janet. It never leads anywhere productive. Good, Janet agreed. But you need a plan. Entitled people don't just walk away when told no. That afternoon, I called Marcus, my attorney. I explained the situation and asked about my options. First, he said, document everything. If she has keys to the beach house, change the locks immediately. Next, let's review your will and property documents to ensure everything is properly protected. By evening, I had a comprehensive plan in place. I wasn't going to respond with anger or lengthy explanations. Instead, I would protect myself calmly and legally. I drove to the beach house the next day. This place had always been my sanctuary, my reward for years of hard work. Walking through the rooms, I remembered bringing Stephanie here for the first time. Her eyes wide with wonder as she took in the ocean view. Now that same daughter was demanding it as if it were her birthright. I called a locksmith and had all the locks changed. I contacted a security company and arranged for cameras to be installed. I spent several hours photographing the entire property and documenting all valuables. If Stephanie and David somehow gained access, I wanted evidence of the condition before they entered. Marcus helped me update all the property documentation, ensuring there could be no question about sole ownership. He also prepared a formal agreement that I could present if I decided to allow limited use of the property, one with clear terms, security deposits, and legal protections. That evening, I sat on the deck, watching the sunset, and drafted an email to Stephanie. No emotional pleas, no lengthy explanation of why her behavior hurt me, just clear, firm boundaries. Stephanie, I've given your request careful consideration. The beach house is not available for extended use. If you're interested in a short-term stay, maximum 1 week, I can prepare a formal rental agreement with appropriate deposits and terms. Please let me know if this would be of interest, and I'll have my attorney send the paperwork. Love, Mum. As I hit send, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. For the first time in decades, I was prioritizing my own well-being over my daughter's demands. The next day, while waiting for Stephanie's response, I made another significant decision. I contacted a charitable foundation that supported single mothers pursuing education and career advancement. I arranged to donate a portion of my savings to establish a small scholarship fund. If my daughter couldn't appreciate the struggles of growing up with a single mother of modest means, perhaps I could help others who understood that reality all too well. I also prepared for the worst. I briefed my neighbors at the beach house, asking them to contact me immediately if they saw anyone on the property. I made copies of all important documents and stored them in a secure location. If Stephanie and David attempted to force the issue, I would be prepared to take legal action, a thought that broke my heart, but seemed increasingly necessary. As night fell, I realized I felt something I hadn't experienced in months. Peace. Not happiness. The situation was far too painful for that. But a quiet certainty that I was finally standing up for myself after a lifetime of putting others first. Stephanie's response came less than an hour after receiving my email. A barrage of angry text messages, followed by a phone call that I reluctantly answered. "A rental agreement," she shouted without even a greeting. "I'm your daughter, not some stranger off the street." "Stephanie, the beach house is my primary asset, and this is ridiculous. We're family helps each other." "Yes," I said calmly. Family does help each other. Family also respects each other's boundaries and property. I could hear her agitated breathing through the phone. Then a male voice in the background asked what was happening. Moments later, David was on the line. "Charlotte," he said, his tone condescending. "Surely we can resolve this like reasonable people. Stephanie has explained your situation to me, and I understand you might be concerned about potential damage to the property." "My situation," I repeated. "Your financial insecurity. Stephanie mentioned you're quite dependent on this property for your retirement. We're prepared to offer a small usage fee if that would make you more comfortable." The patronizing tone made my blood boil, but I remained calm. "This isn't about money, David. The house isn't available for the time period requested, and any use of my property would require a formal agreement. You realize who my family is, don't you?" His voice had taken on a threatening edge. "My father has connections with every judge in 3 counties. If we needed to pursue this legally—" "Are you threatening me?" I interrupted, genuinely shocked. "I'm simply pointing out that making this difficult doesn't benefit anyone. We could make things very uncomfortable for you." I took a deep breath. "I think this conversation is over. Any further communication should go through my attorney, Marcus Daniels. I'll have him send his contact information." I hung up, hands shaking. Within minutes, my phone was flooded with texts from Stephanie. "How dare you hang up on David? You're choosing money over your own daughter. Everyone was right about you. You've always been selfish." I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I called Marcus and updated him on the situation. He immediately sent a formal letter to both Stephanie and David, reiterating that the property was not available, and any trespassing would result in legal action. The next morning, I woke to discover Stephanie had taken the fight public. She had posted a lengthy message on Facebook, portraying herself as the victim of a greedy, uncaring mother who valued property over family. She claimed I had always been emotionally unavailable, had sabotaged her relationships, and was now refusing to support her marriage out of jealousy. It was a masterclass in revisionist history, painting our entire life together in the darkest possible light. She even claimed I had forced her to work her way through college, a complete fabrication given that I had paid every penny of her education. The post tagged several of our mutual friends and family members. My phone began ringing almost immediately. Relatives I hadn't spoken to in years called to ask what was happening. Friends expressed confusion, knowing how devoted I had been to Stephanie. I was devastated, but refused to respond in kind. I would not drag our family disputes into public view. What I didn't expect was the groundswell of support that emerged. Janet posted a forceful defense of me, detailing the sacrifices she had witnessed over decades of our friendship. My sister, though we weren't particularly close, shared photos of Stephanie's graduation with a caption about how I had worked 3 jobs to put this smile on her face. Former colleagues, neighbors, even Stephanie's high school teachers began commenting, all sharing stories of my dedication as a mother. Most surprising were the messages from other mothers, many of them strangers, who reached out privately. They shared similar stories of adult children who had been influenced by partners or in-laws to reject their upbringing and demand financial support. "My son didn't invite me to his wedding either," wrote one woman. "Now he only calls when he needs money." "Stay strong," wrote another. "I gave my daughter my retirement savings for a house down payment. Now she won't let me see my grandchildren because I can't afford lavish gifts." These women invited me to join an online support group for parents experiencing similar situations. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt less alone. Meanwhile, David and Stephanie escalated their threats. David's father called, introducing himself as Judge Richard Hamilton's golf partner, before suggesting this unfortunate situation could be resolved without damaging anyone's reputation. The implied threat was clear. Marcus handled all communications professionally, maintaining that the property was unavailable, and any harassment would be documented for potential legal action. He also advised me to maintain a detailed log of all contact attempts and threats. The battle continued for nearly 2 weeks. Stephanie and David drove to the beach house only to find new locks and security cameras. They threatened legal action, claiming Stephanie had residential rights as my daughter, a legal fiction Marcus quickly dispelled. They even attempted to contact my real estate clients, though thankfully my broker intercepted these efforts. Throughout it all, I maintained my resolve, supported by a community I hadn't realized was there. The Scholarship Fund for Single Mothers received additional donations from friends who had learned about the situation. Several women from the support group became regular confidants, offering wisdom from their own experiences. Eventually, the storm began to subside. Stephanie's social media campaign backfired when several of her own friends commented with confusion, recalling how she had always spoken highly of me before meeting David. David's family, concerned about public image, apparently advised them to drop the matter. The final message came from Stephanie, a terse text reading simply, "Keep your house. We found something better anyway." It wasn't an apology or acknowledgement of wrong, but it was at least an end to the immediate conflict. As painful as it had been, the experience taught me something valuable. After decades of putting my daughter first, it was time to protect myself, not just financially, but emotionally. Setting boundaries wasn't selfish. It was necessary. 6 months passed with no contact from Stephanie. Fall turned to winter, and I spent Thanksgiving with Janet and her family instead of alone. I continued working, found joy in small pleasures, and spent peaceful weekends at the beach house. The Scholarship for Single Mothers selected its first 2 recipients, both women in their 30s, returning to college after raising children alone. Then, on a cold January morning, a letter arrived. Not an email or text, but a handwritten letter on actual stationery. Stephanie's handwriting hadn't changed since high school. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the envelope for nearly an hour, before finding the courage to open it. "Dear Mum," it began. "I don't know if you'll read this, and I wouldn't blame you if you didn't. What I did was unforgivable." The letter continued for 3 pages, detailing how she had been swept up in David's world, intoxicated by wealth and status she'd never experienced. His family had subtly but consistently reinforced the message that her upbringing was something to overcome, a disadvantage to be erased, rather than the loving foundation it had been. "I believed them when they said cutting ties with my past would help me embrace my future," she wrote. "I chose status over the one person who always put me first, and I'll regret that for the rest of my life." She explained that the marriage had begun to unravel almost immediately after the wedding. David's charm had morphed into controlling behavior. His family's generosity came with suffocating expectations. The beach house demand had actually been his father's idea, a test of how completely she had severed ties with her former life. "I don't expect forgiveness," the letter concluded. "I just needed you to know that I understand what I threw away, and I'm deeply, profoundly sorry for the pain I caused." She included her new phone number, not the one I had been blocked from, and an address I didn't recognize. I read the letter multiple times, emotions washing over me in waves. Anger, vindication, heartbreak. And beneath it all, that stubborn, irrational, maternal love that never quite disappears, no matter the circumstances. After 3 days of reflection, I texted the new number, suggesting we meet at a coffee shop halfway between our homes. Neutral territory seemed appropriate for whatever conversation might follow. She was already there when I arrived, looking simultaneously familiar and foreign. The designer clothes and perfect highlights were gone, replaced by a simple sweater and jeans that reminded me of the daughter I used to know. When she saw me, she stood, but didn't approach, clearly uncertain of her welcome. "Thank you for coming," she said as I sat across from her. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her hands trembling slightly around her coffee cup. "Your letter," I began. It meant a lot to receive it. "I've been in therapy," she blurted out. "Twice a week since I left David." "You left." This was news beyond what the letter had shared. She nodded. "3 months ago, it got bad." She didn't elaborate, and I didn't press. There would be time for those details, if and when she wanted to share them. "I'm staying with Amanda until I figure things out," she continued, explaining the unfamiliar address. "I'm working at a marketing firm again, starting over." We talked for nearly 3 hours. There were tears on both sides. Difficult admission moments of painful honesty. She spoke of her shame, her regret, her gradual awakening to how thoroughly she had been manipulated, not just by David, but by her own insecurities and material desires. I shared my devastation, my sense of betrayal the nights spent questioning every parenting decision I'd ever made. I didn't sugarcoat my pain or minimize the damage done to our relationship. "I don't know if things can ever be the same between us," I told her honestly. "Trust once broken that thoroughly doesn't mend overnight." "I know," she said quietly. "I'm not asking for everything to go back to how it was. I'm just asking for a chance to try to rebuild something new." We agreed to take small steps. A text message check-in once a week, perhaps another coffee in a month. No promises beyond that. As we prepared to leave, Stephanie hesitated, then asked the question that must have been weighing on her mind. "Do you think you could ever forgive me?" I considered the question carefully. "I think forgiveness is a process, not a moment," I finally said. "I'm willing to begin that process. The rest will take time." She nodded, accepting this limited offer with a gratitude that suggested she had expected far less. In the months that followed, we maintained those cautious check-ins. Texts became phone calls. Coffee meetings became occasional dinners. We navigated this new relationship carefully, both aware of its fragility. I learned that setting boundaries wasn't just about saying no to unreasonable demands. It was about establishing a healthier relationship overall, one built on mutual respect rather than expectation and obligation. The beach house remained mine alone. Stephanie never asked to use it again, though eventually, after more than a year of rebuilding trust, I invited her to join me there for a day trip. We walked the same shoreline we had explored when she was a child, our conversations a careful blend of memory and caution. I've come to understand that loving our children doesn't mean giving them everything they want. Sometimes the greatest gift we can offer is teaching them that respect goes both ways, that love without boundaries isn't love at all, but a path to exploitation. The Scholarship Fund for Single Mothers has grown, supporting 5 women this year. I volunteer monthly with a group helping mothers navigate difficult relationships with adult children. These connections have expanded my world beyond the narrow focus of motherhood that defined me for so long. Stephanie and I continue our careful reconciliation. She's dating someone new, a teacher with a kind smile and modest background much like our own. I've met him twice, both times in public settings. He seems to value her for who she is, not for who he can shape her to be. I still have the letter she sent tucked away in my desk drawer, not as a reminder of betrayal, but as evidence that even the deepest wounds can begin to heal with time, effort, and honest communication. What would you do if faced with a similar situation with a loved one? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, Please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. Thank you for listening to my journey. Sometimes the most painful chapters of our lives teach us the most valuable lessons about self-worth, boundaries, and the true meaning of love.